Hello and welcome back to the Keep Right On podcast. I'm Alex Dicken, and as ever, I'm joined by my co-host and colleague Brian Dick. Just the two of us this week for this episode in the almost middle of the international break now, with Blues not playing this weekend, but obviously they did play on Tuesday night against Shrewsbury Town in the Bristol Street Motors Trophy. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about the injury news that's come out of Blues in the last 24 hours, some quite significant developments there. We're going to be talking about the Bristol Street Motors Trophy in general, Blues League One form, that defeat at Charlton at the weekend, and then going on to questions and takes from you guys a little bit later on. So, Brian, without further ado, how are you doing?
I'm very well. I'm just trying to get the lyrics to Just the Two of Us out of my head while you were speaking then. Desperately trying not to break into song. And also, as we said before we came on, just sort of pondering how normal it is that Blues win 4-0 away from home. I know not normal, but just, in previous years that would have generated massive excitement, and we're just feeling pretty blasé about it today. So hopefully we can bring some excitement, because, there was plenty of really interesting information on offer last night, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was pretty normal, Brian, wasn't it? I mean, I just said before we came on, it felt like a bit of a pre-season game because Blues had so much of the stadium to themselves, 3,000 and odd of 4,700, I think, were Blues fans there last night. And obviously it was a close game as well, so it wasn't that hard to get home from. It was a bit of a training exercise, wasn't it, Brian? Especially first half, where Blues were, head and shoulders above Shrewsbury. The first three goals excellently worked. I know Chris Davies really enjoyed them because a lot of it was off the training ground, in the way that Blues played through Shrewsbury, but also in the way that they pressed. You think of the third goal, where the attacking players have won the ball back quite high up and quickly pounced, and it's a lovely bit of an interchange leading to Scott Wright scoring. So a lot to like about that performance. They didn't really take their foot off the pedal that much in the second half. They still created a few more chances, and it was entertaining for those people who made that trip.
Yeah, I thought it was probably a 20-minute spell at the start of the second half where Shrewsbury came back into it a little bit. But by the end, again, that sort of attack on defence pattern seemed to resume. Obviously, it helps when you can bring Emil Hansson and Djukovic and guys like that off the bench. Shrewsbury were pretty much down to bare bones. We were talking about that when on the way over, weren't we? It was just a thoroughly good, professional, polished performance. I think Blues supremacy was probably sort of encapsulated in a nutshell with that third goal, when they were just so masterful, and there was no panic. They were able to express themselves, pick their passes, try and create the perfect chance. Maybe in a League One game where it's 2-2 and tensions are a little bit higher, or the pressure's more on, then someone snatches at that chance, or doesn't take as much care. But that just the composure in that situation spoke of the supremacy that they had last night. So yeah, some really good performances as well. I was quite engaged with a couple of the players that came into the team and the way they were sort of deployed. Which, some interesting stuff from Chris Davies there. Taylor Gardner-Hickman thought was good. Keshi Anderson was excellent. Scott Wright obviously got his 2 goals and put in a good performance as well. Maybe some others that you'd have thought, I was hoping for a bit more from, like Alfie May and potentially Mark Leonard. So yeah, just food for thought, and really good to get the Charlton misfire out of the system as well. And Blues now really can sort of close down, if that's what Chris Davies will allow them to do, which I'm sure it won't be, for the international break, on the back of a win and, feeling good about themselves again.
We talk a little about Scott Wright, because obviously he's come in, he made that instant impact with a goal against Wigan to give Blues 3 points there. Then started the game against Walsall in the first Bristol Street Motors game. And to be fair, he didn't really impress me that much that night, to be honest. I didn't think he was great. Fairly ineffective as a right winger, more of a natural right winger that night, played quite wide with Taylor Gardner-Hickman at right back, actually took it into midfield. But the structure of it now, with Gardner-Hickman keeping the width on the right-hand side as right back, and Wright's been kind of moulded into this little role as an inside right forward almost, hasn't he? Where he kind of gets the freedom to play inside when Blues are in possession, and it really, really seems to suit his ball carrying abilities, doesn't it? He's played really well off the bench the last 3 or 4 league games, particularly in that Peterborough game where he was fantastic in the second half. And he was again carried that into the game against Shrewsbury, didn't he? His finishing's really good. I think that's what I've noticed about him. He's pretty ruthless when he does get into those positions, particularly that second goal, which, like you say, some forwards would have snatched that, but he finished very confidently.
Yeah, you basically said everything I was going to say there. The Peterborough game, as we've said at the time, the substitution that Chris Davies made to bring him on and harness those ball carrying abilities through the middle of the park, in that inside right position. That was sort of a new side to his game, or I thought to myself then, I can see how this guy can be more effective in this Blues team. Wasn't massively keen on his Wigan performance, although he took his goal well. I think if there's one characteristic or feature of his game that has sort of spanned all of his appearances so far, it is the positions he takes up in the box. He does find space well in the box, and as you say, the finishing's been very good so far as well. So, yeah, for me, I think he's starting to creep into the best 11 now. Maybe we can go even a little bit stronger than that, and he's sort of kicked the door down a little bit, and he probably is in the best 11 at the moment.
Yeah, he's in it for me.
Yeah, as that inside right with the fullback providing the width.
I think so. Yeah, I think there is a question about this later, so I don't really want to kill that question. But I think he probably is for me. But yeah, we'll go on to that a little bit more later. Speaking to him after the game, actually, funnily enough, he said that a lot of his football in his career has been played as a left winger, and also as a number 10. But he's playing in a very different role. I suppose he's sort of half a number 10, isn't he?
The number 10 role, yeah.
He's a half a number 10 in this Blues team. When it's in possession, he does become a number 10, doesn't he?
Is that a 5? Is that a 5 then?
He's definitely not a 5. So yeah, I mean, I suppose it is to harness those ball carrying abilities, isn't it? Because if he was stuck out on the wide left, that's a completely different role in this Blues system. When they have possession, that role is very wide, isn't it? And it stays there, and it's very suited to Emil Hansson. Obviously, Yokoyama did it well against Shrewsbury, but I don't think that would suit Scott Wright in this team. So Davies has found a role for him, and I think we are going to come on to it in a bit, but he would be in my best 11 now, yeah.
Yeah, indeed. What was he saying to you last night? Was he pleased with his sort of trajectory so far?
Yeah, actually incredibly selfless, which again is straight from the Chris Davies hymn sheet, isn't it? Really, talking about the team rather than himself, and saying that he's kind of happy to play both roles, whether he's coming off the bench or obviously starting games. Naturally, every footballer does want to start games, but we've spoken about before the 5 subs has really changed football, hasn't it, in that respect, and that it allows kind of players, a manager, to make a sub at half time, whereas he probably would have kept the powder dry in years gone by, wouldn't he? So, yeah, he seems a really good character. Nice broad Scottish accent. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, is that why you wanted me to interview him? You were worried that you wouldn't be able to understand him?
You have got Scottish links, haven't you? Yeah. Maybe.
Or you were just trying to press on with your Chris Davies work, weren't you, at that stage?
I was up and down the stairs, wasn't I? Yeah.
Yeah, well, you need to keep fit. Yeah, lots of thumbs up here for Scott Wright. As many thumbs up for Emil Hansson, who came off the bench, would you say?
Yeah.
Some thumbs up.
Yeah, some. I've only got 2, Brian, but yeah. Yeah. Like I thought he did okay. I mean, to score with your first touch after about 60 seconds of coming on the field is fantastic. There was an occasion when he got into the box, and I know you said he should have gone around the outside, and he opted for the cutback, didn't he? And I thought the cutback was the correct call, but I just think it probably should have happened sooner. There were players queuing up there. I think Leonard and I can't remember who else, but someone else was there as well. I just thought if you get it back sooner, they've got probably a clearer shot at goal. By the time he gave it to them, there were bodies in front of them. I know you wanted to hang up to Djukovic, but I think I said at the time that's probably maybe not understanding the player yet because they haven't played an awful lot together.
Yeah, I mean, Lukas Djukovic, I would have thought, he would know how the best to get out of Lukas Djukovic. Listen, it's a bugbear of mine. I've whinged endlessly about wingers not going on the outside often enough, and probably more so about Hansson than many others, because Sariki Dembele, when he played on the left, he would go around the outside quite a lot. I just thought it was a good opportunity because he was in space, he was in behind the Shrewsbury defence, and if he holds his width and uses his left foot, which maybe he's not as comfortable in doing, and lifts the ball up for Lukas Djukovic. I was watching Djuki actually, and he made a couple of little darting runs to try and get that yard of space that would potentially have given him, had the ball come in, an attempt at goal. I guess it goes back to me wanting to sell my soul to the devil for a Djukovic goal. I guess I'd have been on the pitch, quite frankly. But yeah, it just frustrates me a little bit. If Cochrane's not going to go on the overlap, which isn't really his role, I just think it congests the play when Hansson comes in, which he does seem to do 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10 if he comes in off the wing onto his right foot.
For someone who is being asked to stay very wide as a left winger, he's not very left-footed at all, is he? Like it's quite a weak left foot, isn't it? I would say you're not really seeing him go outside on the outside and whip across him with his left foot, have you? He does tend to come inside and whip it in with his right. Whereas Yokoyama's probably the polar opposite in that he can go both ways. The quality's not always there on the delivery, but he can go both ways.
Listen, I really enjoyed Yokoyama's performance last night. Wrote a piece about it, but then bemoaned the fact that maybe there wasn't the assist or the goal that his promise sort of suggested there might be. And then Hansson comes off the bench and virtually with his first touch, as you said, scores a goal. So you can't have it both ways. I accept that. I know Richard Wilford is a big fan of Hansson. He sees the goals and assists coming, and they may well do. They probably should do in this team. But just for the moment, there's players I prefer. Let's put it that way.
The last point I want to speak about on the game itself, or player, was Ryan Alsop. Obviously, there's been a bit of an issue with the goalkeeping situation this season. It's probably the one position which has been up for contention and up for debate. Alsop's come in the last 3 games now, and there were 2 moments I think in his game. The one first half where he flapped it across and Blues almost would have conceded on the second cross without Dion Sanderson clearing off the goal line. But then at the start of the second half, when Sago Jr. went through, Alsop stood up really well and produced a good save. So what have you made of the goalkeeping situation in general, and do you think Alsop's the man, Brian?
Well, if Peacock Farrell has got a shoulder injury, then Alsop has got a run at it now, hasn't he? I think if our starting point is Peacock Farrell's the better goalkeeper with a capital G and Ryan Alsop is the better player with his feet with a capital F, then I would say that Alsop's goalkeeping has been fine so far. Certainly nothing to cause alarms. I know his play with his feet at Charlton did create the odd alarm, didn't it, at times? Having been kind of critical about Peacock Farrell, I think we have to, we have been. I think we now have to ride the Ryan Alsop roller coaster and see where it goes. It's not been alarming so far, but particularly, I think he's done well. I only saw the highlights of the Charlton game. What were your last night? He wasn't unduly under much duress, and I thought he did everything pretty well apart from that one cross. Would be the only issue I had with him last night. I thought everything else was pretty good. He did have a couple of shots that were from distance, but his handling was good. What about the Charlton game?
Similar, Brian, to be honest, because for all that Blues didn't create at Charlton weren't exactly hammering the door down. They only had that one shot on target, maybe 2, and obviously that was the goal that he couldn't really do anything about. To be honest, it was his defence's fault. Obviously, there was the end of the first half where Blues seemed intent on giving Charlton a goal and got away with it a couple of times, but it didn't really, no alarms for me. I think he's maybe a bit too casual in that he wants to bait the press himself sometimes rather than play out to his defenders and let them do it. But that's possibly a good thing as well because he doesn't lose confidence, and that does transmit to his defenders, and they clearly have confidence in him when they play it back to him. But yeah, no alarms for me. I've been relatively comfortable watching him in goal for Blues. There are going to be bigger tests, obviously, when Blues do have a relatively off day defensively, and he has to make 5 saves. And I suppose that's when we'll see how good a goalkeeper is when they're actually tested.
Yeah, I suppose the starting position as well is the other question mark, isn't it, with Allsop? And it's been fine, hasn't it? There's been no issues there. But, then again, the Blues haven't really been in a situation where someone's tried to lob Allsop from 40 yards. Maybe now we've pointed out, I'm sure the rest of League One is hanging on our every word, aren't they? Maybe if people look back into his time at Hull, his starting position might be something that they can look at. But so far, we are in Ryan Allsop's turn now, aren't we? In that sort of period of time, and it's fine. Yeah.
I did quickly want to speak about the Bristol Street Motors trophy permutations. It does feel like Blues are going for the double here. Obviously, they did that last time they were in the third tier back in 94, 95. And last night was quite significant, really, wasn't it, Brian? Because if Blues hadn't won that game, they would have had to beat Fulham under-21s in their final group game to go through. Now, because they won and obviously drew against Walsall and they've got 4 points, they can actually draw against Fulham and still go through on the in the final group game in 3 weeks' time. So, as long as they don't lose against Fulham's under-21s, Blues will go through to the next round. And, a trip to Wembley is still on the cards.
Well, I mean, that's obviously brilliant. But as I've, again, previously said on here, I do think the competition has value for giving game time to people who need it. Not least the prospect, had Blues gone out last night, that Fulham game would have been an absolute soul destroyer to have gone to in that dead rubber, wouldn't it? But yeah, I mean, the offer of Wembley is a fantastic inducement, and the closer Blues get, I suspect their players might be more and more tuned in. If there were any issues about focus last night, which I don't think there were, I think against the Walsall game they were a little bit sloppy, weren't they? In the first one, but the closer they get, excitement builds and momentum is a great thing. And let's get past Fulham first and take it from there. But as regards, the amount of minutes it'll give Chris Davies to play with, that will be good.
Yeah,
I guess if there's a massive FA Cup run, which I'm also up for, too many minutes on the back of international postponements does start to raise its own issue, doesn't it? But for the time being, that competition is progressing nicely.
Yeah, I suppose that's why you've got 26 players, and they're going to need those players because the injuries they've got at the moment. Obviously, Christian Bielik went off at the half time of the defeat to Charlton, and Chris Davies said after the Shrewsbury game that he's going to be out at the very least for a few weeks with that ankle injury. So bad news there. Iwata took a knock, and Davies didn't seem too pessimistic about it. He seemed like it wasn't that bad. So hopefully he'll be fine for the Lincoln game after the international break. And obviously we know now, you mentioned that Peter Farrell has a shoulder issue. Interestingly, he actually said he's been dealing with that since the Peterborough game. So obviously he was taken out the firing line after that game where he made a mistake. So he went away with Northern Ireland, and they basically thought it was kind of worse than had obviously been let on. So he's come back to Blues for treatment, and we'll see how that goes and whether he's actually involved and takes his place in the squad against Lincoln. But the big one there, Brian, is Bielik, isn't it? He is, I think I've said a couple of times, he's the only undroppable in this team for me. I think when he's fit, he plays 100%. Which is why I think Chris Davies will be relatively pleased with the performances of both Ben Davies and also particularly Dion Sanderson last night against Shrewsbury, because he played really well. Yeah,
I don't think Bielik is the only undroppable now, actually, but we can move on.
There's one more for me. One more for me. Go on, undroppable's gone. Who's your other one?
There's two more. There's two more for me. Stansfield
and Peck.
And Peck, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I do agree. Actually, there's no way you're dropping Jay Stansfield, having broken every transfer record in sight for him.
No, exactly. Anyway, the question was about Davies and Sanderson, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought they both did well last night. Ben Davies had a wobble in his first game, we thought, against Walsall in this competition. He's very good against Rotherham. And seems to be getting into some sort of rhythm, albeit he didn't play at Charlton but from the start, but he's getting into some sort of rhythm now, isn't he? And we are seeing, a a decent pedigree centre back. You know, as we've said many times, you know, the strength in depth of Blues squad is mind blowing. Not least the fact that you can have someone like Ben Davies as your first choice or even second choice centre back. You know, but in League One, but yeah, he's stepped in and done really well. And I think I don't really have many issues, to be honest with you. Bielik's obviously good, but Ben Davies brings a left foot, doesn't he? Which will be handy.
Are you going with him then? Are you?
He was that the question? What do you? Well, go on. You present the case. What did you make of Sanderson last night then?
I thought he was really good, to be honest. I was surprised how good he was because it's been 2 months since he last played. And I don't think he started the season that well against Reading. I thought he was quite average after a very good pre-season. And
I was going to say he was good in pre-season. Yeah. Against
Charlton, I thought it was a needless red card he picked up because the 2 bookings were from defensive mistakes that he made and made fouls to try and recover from them.
Yeah.
So I was disappointed with that, but yeah, I thought he was really good against Shrewsbury. Granted, the opposition is not as strong as what he'd faced previously. I didn't think Shrewsbury had an awful lot intact, to be honest. But I thought Sanderson was really good, not only in his defensive work, because he did make the most important defensive intervention during that game to clear off the line, but he was also very good at playing out from the back. And as we've mentioned, he played a role in the Awata goal, didn't he, with a really nice pass to Scott Wright down the right-hand side, a defence splitting pass. So he's got that in his locker, hasn't he? And Scott Wright pointed that out in his interview afterwards, saying Dion can play like that, how we need our defenders to play. So it's good to have him back. I think it's a question. I just think Ben Davies' left foot gives him the edge. It gives the balance, doesn't it? I know Bielik's not left-footed, but you know, I don't think Clara or Sanderson would want to play on the left. I think they're both probably earmarked for that right side position, and Clara's not going to be dropped. So it's going to be, I think, Davies and Clara.
Yeah, I agree. You know, Chris Davies, you know, brought Ben Davies to the club, didn't he? You know, therefore he has clearly some sort of confidence in him. Yeah, I agree. There's no point repeating what you said. I think it will be Clara and Ben Davies, and I'm wondering if Clara will get the armband.
Well, that depends whether Alfie May keep his place in the 11, doesn't it? I think if May plays, I think he'll captain the team. I think Clara... so. Yeah. I know Clara captained the team at Rotherham, but May didn't play in that game, did he? He didn't start that game. And when they played against Walsall and Bielik didn't start, May captained the team and Clara was in the team. So, I mean, I was speaking to Chris Davies about the captain situation the other week, and he said, I've literally just got one captain, and that's Christian Bielik. And then there's not really a vice or a leadership group as such. Right. They're just leaders. So, obviously, Clara's one of them, May's one of them, Ethan Laird's one of them, Peck's one of them. So I've essentially just named a leadership group, but you know,
yeah.
so yeah, we've not got one, but those are the leaders. So yeah.
What's wrong with Juki? Why do you hate Juki?
Oh, Juki as well. Of course, Juki's a leader. But to be fair, Juki obviously isn't going to play, is he? So not in the league game. So yeah. If he was playing, he'd be captain, wouldn't he?
I mean, Clara just exudes captain to me. His demeanour on the field, his physicality, the way he, you know, pops up in his little melees and sort of sorts things out in his own little way. And I noticed last night when the game finished, he came to the near side just in front of us and was signing autographs. I don't know if Blues had sent a random player out to go and sign some autographs, but last night it was Clara and he did that, and you know, I thought that reflected really well on him. So yeah, for me, you know, he's built like a captain for whatever that means. You know,
you're built like a captain, Brian.
Yeah, that might be where it falls down. Yeah. So I know we didn't have the captaincy on our running order, but yeah, it's Clara and Davies, isn't it? With the luxury of having Dion making a really positive return to the side, which brings us on to takes and questions, doesn't it?
It does. We've only got one take this week. A lot of questions have been sent in, and we're going to get round to as many as possible. So the first take was from Mr. Brum, lovely name. TGH, what a great signing. Such a presence up and down the right. One of the standouts for me so far this season. Brian, discuss.
Yeah, I agree. I really like the way he plays right back with such physicality. You know, he plays like a seasoned championship player for me. And I know he hasn't got a huge amount of games under his belt. You know, he's still relatively early in his career, isn't he? But, you know, he just comes across as a championship footballer. And I like as I say, the sort of the physical side of the game that he brings to playing right back. He does have that flexibility. We kind of half wondered if Davies might play him in midfield last night, didn't we? And bring Brandon Kaler in at right back. But Gardner Hickman, you know, he's been a real pleasant surprise to me. You know, he sort of came in quite late in the window, didn't he? And you thought, oh, well, that's a bit of repetition of what they've already got. If you're looking at the central midfielders are already very well stocked. But I think that versatility, which served him reasonably well, got him into the side at Albion under Steve Bruce as a right back. You know, I think that versatility is something that appeals to Blues. And yeah, if he was to be the first choice right back going forward, you know, couldn't really have too many complaints, would you?
No, I would only echo what you said, Brian. I think I'm not sure he nails down a consistent place in this Blues midfield now, to be honest. I think there's too much quality there in Pekka and Awata. And you know, Mark Leonard can't get a game either. So I think it's great that Gardner Hickman can play at right back, and this opportunity's opened up for him. I think he's probably somewhere in between Samson and Laird, isn't he? He's not as athletic as Laird, but I'd say he's probably more athletic than Samsted. He's got the grit that I think probably more grit and, you know, steel than both of them. He looks like kind of a wily championship player, doesn't he? In the way he plays, even though he's only 22. He's probably not got quite the end product of Samsted when he gets into the final third.
And he doesn't seem to want to go beyond the defender, the last defender, to get to the byline. You know, he seems more comfortable putting his foot on the ball and maybe curling it round the defender. And you know, maybe, you know, it's a cross into the box rather than a pullback from Gardner Hickman.
Davies, I was speaking about Gardner Hickman the other week. Davies did say how tactically switched on he is, and there was one thing last night that I noticed 3 or 4 times in the first half where Cochrane was stepping inside and doing a ping over to the right-hand side to Gardner Hickman, and that seemed to, when Cochrane lined up that pass, it seemed to be a trigger for Scott Wright to make a run in behind the left fullback. And first time, Gardner Hickman would take it down and put it in behind, and he got in 2 or 3 times just doing that simple tactic. So, clearly very in tune with that, and you know, Davies loves players who are switched on to that sort of thing. So I'm not surprised he's getting a lot of football.
Yeah, he's a cog that fits into the Davies machine, isn't he? You know, he's going to do what Chris Davies asks of him, and Chris Davies will like that. So he will get plenty of football. The one thing that sort of stood out for me last night, the volley, I would love for him to have hit the back of the net with that volley in the first half, because that was a really nice move. And the other thing was, it was in the second half, I think Blues lost the ball on halfway, and it's sort of bouncing up. No one can really get to it. And Gardner Hickman just blocked off his man. And it was a foul, but it was a foul that needed to be given just to break up play. In the end, the referee didn't blow up, did he? Let play carry on. And you thought, well, Gardner Hickman might get pulled back for a booking here, but then the evening passed on, and he didn't in that situation. But it was that willingness to put his body on an opponent just to interrupt, a counter-attack, that I thought, that's a proper gnarled championship kind of footballer approach there. So I've been very, very impressed.
Just about the only Blues player the referee didn't book, didn't he? There's one stage where he's just walking around, handing cards out. Moving on to questions.
Just on that tackle on Scott Wright was nasty, wasn't it?
It was,
the one that sparked the melee and got a few bookings. Scott Wright could feel rightly aggrieved that he got booked for his response to that, didn't he?
Yeah, it was a bad one. Scott Wright did really well, because it was one of those where he kind of overran it, lost the ball, and then straight away just turned around and aggressively, fairly taken the ball back, and obviously the player's pride was hurt or whatever, and he's lashed out and hit the back of his legs, and it was a really poor challenge, almost like a scissor from behind, wasn't it? So
yeah.
So I don't blame Wright for reacting that way. And interesting, like we said in the Wrexham game, every single Blues player piled in, didn't they? Ben Davies kind of led it, and the rest of them just kind of followed. And there was another melee, and I don't think Blues are going to stop doing that. To be honest, they'll take their fine, 2,500 against Wrexham, but I think it's a sign of the team spirit and camaraderie amongst this group of players.
2,500 is just a few page views, isn't it? Just a few clicks or page impressions. So yeah, absolutely for them. Leads us to questions. Interesting one from Mason here about Gardner Hickman. Had a question to do with the loan, such as Gardner Hickman and Samstead. Both are classed as being on loan, but both have put goodbye messages to their new parent clubs, or to their now parent clubs. Sorry. So. He just wanted to know whether we both think that, I suppose he's hinting at the chance that the deals will be permanent. What's your understanding there?
Well, there are obviously options with both. I think looking at it, I expect Gardner Hickman to become a permanent deal. I think that's probably designed to become a permanent deal as well. Samstead as well, designed to become a permanent deal. I think Samstead one protects both the player and club, though. He's obviously come from the Eredivisie, has only signed on loan with an option. So if Blues, for whatever reason, didn't manage to get out of League One, or if he didn't play much this season, then he could probably say at the end of the season, you know what, this hasn't worked, I'm going to go somewhere else and get regular football. But I think both are designed to become permanent deals.
Yeah, I don't think this recruitment team are bringing in people just to be a sticking plaster for one season, are they? Then return to their parent clubs. You know, it's very much I suppose, I suppose in a way to what Gary Rowett did, where he'd sort of loan and then try before buying, sort of thing. With Robert Tesher and people like that. As you said, I'd fully expect Gardner Hickman to be in the squad next season. Darren says, are we more threatening when May and Jay don't play together? Does playing them together stifle the attack? We've had this discussion before, haven't we? And I personally think that if you're going to play another striker with Jay Stansfield, who obviously is an undroppable, then Lyndon Dykes is probably a more natural fit.
Yeah. I'm probably at the stage now where I think maybe it's best not to play another striker with Jay Stansfield and to have Williamson behind him and Scott Wright off the right. Because then obviously your left wing is Hansson or Yokoyama. Is it probably Hansson? Well, maybe even Anderson. Hansson or Anderson. Probably Hansson. But my thinking on the subject now is I really like Alfie May. He was fantastic when he first came, and I think he's got a really, really big role to play this season. The problem I have is I don't think he's as effective as the 10, as obviously what he is as a 9. You know, Alfie May actually, when you look at his career, he played, wide left positions and played deeper earlier in his career and didn't do as well. The goal has come since he's moved into a central striker position because he obviously has that knack and that finishing ability. If Blues can't have him as their main striker, which it doesn't look like is going to be the case with Stansfield, very much seen as a striker by Chris Davies, then I'd use him as a, not always, as opposed to Stansfield, but I wouldn't be starting them together a lot until, you see improvements in their link up, because it's not been perfect. There have been moments where it's been good, and it can be good, but we saw against Charlton how kind of ineffective it was. We saw that in every game, really, where they've been together, apart from maybe Huddersfield, where they did combine a few times.
Callum sort of asked a question about Alfie May as well. Thoughts on how quiet May was last night? We didn't seem to put the ball in behind for him. He felt bad for him yesterday. I mean, we've discussed May quite a lot, haven't we? And wondered whether he knew that Stansfield and then Dykes were going to come in. Listen, I just feel that Jay Stansfield looks more like a championship and above striker, as does Lyndon Dykes in a different way. I do. I just feel in the striking role, I feel Alfie's probably third choice now.
I don't know about third choice. I still think he's ahead of Dykes for me.
Do you?
Yeah, I think he probably is. But this is the weird thing, because I think as soon as Blues get to the Championship Alfie May then does become third choice. I think Dykes goes ahead of him. But I think the way Blues play, I think it's probably more geared towards May than Dykes. Against Charlton, when Dykes came on for the final 30 minutes or whatever, they still kept playing the same way. And you just think at that point, be a little bit more direct, because if you're a bit more direct, it's probably going to suit him, this big 6'3" target man you've got up there. But I still think because of the way Davies wants to play that May will be ahead of Dykes as the striker if Stansfield isn't playing. But it's quite clear that Stansfield is going to be the main man.
Yeah, I mean, if plan A is pass it around and, you know, have Jay as the spearhead, and then Jay obviously, you know, is the best pressing. If that's plan A, then plan B isn't, do that again, but with Alfie May this time.
Yeah.
Plan B is, you know, go a bit more direct with Lyndon Dykes, surely.
Yeah. Well, it should be, I would think. Yeah. You make a very good point, Brian. It should be. I don't know. May's different to Stansfield in my eyes. You know, Stansfield.
Yeah, that's fair. They're not interchangeable. You're right. Yeah, they're not identical.
He is different to Stansfield. I just don't think they complement each other that brilliantly at the moment. I'm not saying it can't work. It can work. I just don't. I think if it is going to work, I don't think the answer is May being the guy who's withdrawn in a slightly deeper role. I think Stansfield probably has to be that player. But you know, Chris Davies said repeatedly he wants to get Stansfield in positions where he's playing off the shoulder and can hurt teams with his movement. And we've seen like instances of goals where Stansfield's movement has created goals with those runs in behind. We saw it twice against Rotherham. Who was the other one? We saw it against Huddersfield. So it's clearly a tactic Blues are working on, and that works around Jay Stansfield. Alfie May probably isn't the guy who makes those runs. Yeah.
But then if there's a chance in the box, you probably do want it to fall to Alfie May rather than Lyndon Dykes, don't you? Yeah, okay. Listen, what a lovely conversation to be having. Is it the club? Is it the League One record transfer, the League One leading scorer for the last 2 years? Yeah, or the Scotland international that you're trying to perm 1/2 strikers out of? They'll get plenty of football. Should we just hide there?
Yeah, the strike force is too good, we've decided.
Let's just take refuge in the fact that they'll get plenty of football all the way to Wembley. So, yeah. I suppose what Callum is saying is the issue has not yet been resolved, and I think we probably both agree on that, don't we?
Yeah. I mean, yesterday was a case where Stansfield wasn't playing, so it was just May. Sometimes I don't think he was necessarily not involved in the way that Blues were playing. I think he was involved in some of the movements and some of the interchange. I just think, you know, Scott Wright and Keshi Anderson are good players, and they came to the fore a little bit yesterday and combined well together.
Yeah, it was very much their match, wasn't it? They sort of thrived in the spaces. Yeah, I agree. Which brings us from Ryan. Would you start Scott Wright in the next league game, given the impact he's had recently?
I knew there was one. We both said we would. Indeed.
Okay. So the second part to that question is, if so, who would you drop for him?
Yeah, May for me. That's a change I'd make. I think I'd play Scott Wright on the right, as I said it about 5 minutes ago, I think, and I'd move Williamson centrally, and I'd play Hansson left behind Stansfield. There's always this argument in international breaks. Will the manager go with a team of players that he's worked with during that break? Chris Davies probably can't afford to this time, can he? Because he's got so many key players, big players away on international duty. Stansfield's away this time. Stansfield comes back and plays, surely. Peck comes back and plays, surely. Williamson, you know, if Luke Harris was fit, maybe Williamson might not play, but I think, again, comes back and plays. So
get away with yourself.
So...
absolute sacrilege.
Oh God, anything against Thor and you I'd go Scott Wright, Williamson, Hansson, Stansfield. Yeah.
I feel like I should disagree to make it interesting, but Scott Wright, in my mind, has also played himself into the starting lineup. I think the machine favours his skill set at the moment, and you know, as much as Gardner Hickman is a cog that's making his work, so is Scott Wright, and it's all about relationships within that team. And then, as you said, the relationship between Wright and Gardner Hickman is looking pretty good at the moment. So, yeah. Thought-provoking question, that one, Ryan. Thank you. Dave J has asked, thought Yokoyama looked dangerous going forward, but worried whether he'll adapt to the defensive responsibilities a bit like Dembele. Let's just, before we come on to the second part, I mean, I would say Yokoyama is very much earlier in his career than Dembele. You know, is Dembele 28?
It's 28, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So Dembele doesn't want to track back now. He's probably not going to. Yokoyama. Yeah. Interestingly, Chris Davies has spoken about Yokoyama having a sort of a cultural and lifestyle and footballing transition period, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think Yokoyama's really grafting, to be fair. When you watched him against Shrewsbury, you know, he was tracking back, he was supporting Cochrane in a way that, you know, Dembele didn't for Lee Buchanan last season at times. So I'm not sure I'd throw him into that bracket yet. I think he's clearly a willing worker. He's really, you know, there are obviously some teething issues and there's a language barrier to overcome. That's quite obvious. But as far as work rate goes, Yokoyama's 100% there in my eyes.
He's very moldable or coachable, isn't he, Yokoyama, I feel?
He is definitely, and he become more coachable when they can obviously communicate better together. But, you know, they've employed a translator, which I think is a very interesting step, not only for Yokoyama, but to also help Iwata, because he isn't completely fluent in English yet. But mainly for Yokoyama, as far as I'm told. And, you know, the translator was there last night with them. He's present on the training pitches. I don't know how involved he'll be in that, because that's kind of obviously Davies' domain. But, you know, if Davies picks something out to Yokoyama and pulls him aside, then obviously the translator can translate. And he's also in team meetings, because Yokoyama did actually an interview with Blues TV and said, you know, in the team meetings, I have no idea what the manager is saying. Yeah. And he relied on Koji first, Koji Miyoshi, and now he's relying on Iwata. Iwata can understand some English, apparently, so he's relying on him to kind of take the information on board, but now he's going to have a translator who can obviously explain that to him perfectly. So that's going to be a big help for Yokoyama, and hopefully, I don't think doesn't really feel like a massive barrier in football, does it? But obviously,
I don't know. I was just going to say, if you are playing for a detail-rich coach like Chris Davies,
yeah, that's true. True.
And you're going out, you know, having maybe understood 10% of what's been told to you, that is going to manifest itself in your performance, isn't it? In your decision making. And if there is a slight sort of but or question mark with Yokoyama at the moment, it was, you know, does he know what he's trying to do when he gets past his man, which he did with ridiculous ease last night, and he did against Wickham with ridiculous ease as well, didn't he? So yeah, a massively high ceiling for Yokoyama.
Yeah, Davies made the point that, you know, he's got the raw materials are there to work with, aren't they?
Yeah,
so you know, he's got such explosiveness, he's got acceleration. He's you know, when we always talk about, you know, the robustness of players now, don't we, as well? And he's, you know, got a very good frame. He's robust. He can go past low center of gravity. And like you say, Brian, his delivery's not bad. He probably needs to get his head up a little bit more and pick someone out. But his crossing itself isn't bad. So a lot to work with. And
he does go both ways. You know, he will go inside and outside, you know, so that's a massive tick from me. Not that he needs it, but yeah. Dave has also asked, do you see Wright starting more, which I think we said. Will he be tried on the left? And you've addressed the issue about communication with Chris Davies. I think we've probably done the Scott Wright, haven't we? Yeah. Which brings us to Jack Haycock. Do you know what happened to the open houses the club was running? I thought they were supposed to be quarterly, but it feels like it's been a bit longer than that.
Yeah, there's been 2 so far. I think there one was in November last year and one April this year, where they obviously talked about the new stadium. I don't want to steal their thunder, but I believe there is going to be an open house, not in the distant future, to be honest. They want to talk about some of the things they've been doing, not only at the stadium, but also their respective training grounds, both the Epic in Henley and also West Hills, which I'm told is very different, looking very different to what it used to. So I believe there is going to be an open house coming up soon. I always thought the quarterly thing was going to be hard to stick to, because not that much changes in a quarter of a year. So, but yeah, there is apparently going to be one fairly soon.
Which brings us to, I wish I'd have checked this question before I read it now. BCFC Stato always comes up with some good numbers. With Blues scoring 3 in the first half for the first time since December 2022 versus Reading, and scoring in the first 15 minutes for the third time this season. What's the best first half performance you've seen from Blues, apart from last night? Have you got one that you've covered in your time? Because I need to have a little bit of a ponder. So yes, is the answer you're looking for.
Not one that I've covered, but I went as a fan with our friend Shane Ireland a few years ago for the Hull game. Do you remember the Hull game when it was really snowing?
Yeah.
Snowing in like March. And they won that 3-0. And I thought, because I remember them being really good in the first half, and I thought it was more, but they only scored one of their goals in the first half and scored two right after half time. So I'm not sure whether I count that one, but they did also score two. I filled in for you at Luton, didn't I? And they scored two in the first half there and won 5-0. So I'd probably go for one of those two games. The Hull one is just probably slightly more memorable because of the weather conditions for me.
The one I would go for, I think, would be Reading in December 2014. And Blues beat Reading 6-1. And I think Damari Gray scored a hat-trick in the first half, and Blues had scored 4 by half-time. And I bizarrely remember that game, not for sort of Damari's breakthrough game, but for Andy Shinnie scoring a goal, which wasn't very common. So, yeah, that would be... It's about 10 years ago, Blues 6, Reading 1, and I think Nigel Adkins got sacked shortly after that, like within days of that as well. So, if supporters have got their own answers to that, then do feel free to leave them in the comments section on this down below. So, yeah, and I suppose that brings us back to where we came in. It's just sort of how blasé we are about the fact Blues are scoring bucket loads of goals because, 18 months ago, this seemed impossible, didn't it?
No, it didn't. To be fair, I'm factoring in the opposition because I don't think Shrewsbury are great. To be honest, I think they're going to really struggle this season. I'm probably going to be fortunate to stay in the league. But yeah, it was so enjoyable to go there and, have such a convincing win. Be able to basically write the report and ratings with 10 minutes to go, knowing that there was never going to be any danger of anything changing. So yeah, a nice evening. I actually hope when Blues go to Shrewsbury end of November, they give them a similar kind of high number of tickets because I think, that's what I hope a lot of League One clubs do this season because you're only kind of hurting yourself if you kind of don't give a team that is going to sell out, whether it's 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, all of those tickets. And take the kind of the money that's going to come from it. I don't think Shrewsbury will do it because obviously there's the issue of kind of relocating season ticket holders and stuff, isn't there? Which probably never goes down well. But it would be nice if Blues could. I mean, they're going to get the away end, but if they could have the end or the side they had against Shrewsbury this time as well. Imagine 2 stands. That would be good.
Just not have any home fans at any Blues game. Just want to, before we sign off, I just want to signpost a couple of pods we've got coming up. We're due to do a bit of a deeper dive on the new signings. How many of them were there, Alex, in the summer? It's
17.
17. So a deep dive on all of those guys, see how they're getting on. And I've spoken to Steve Claridge, the last man, or the man prior to Shea Adams to score 20 league goals in a season. And obviously a key component of the side that came up in 94-95. So that'll be coming this week as well. So we done, Alex?
Yes, but are we supposed to be the Christophe Dugarry posters, Brian? We need to get in the people who want to get in touch with us. We have already messaged them, haven't we?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got their names, their YouTube handles here. Paul J Vickers and Dan Rusty 1990. We have messaged. Please do get in touch with us via the message, and we'll get those posters sent out to you guys.
Yeah, just give them those handles again.
Paul J Vickers and Dan Rusty 1990.
Brilliant, thanks. So all that remains is to thank you all for listening. Thank Alex for his time, and it's a keep right on from both of us.